can we ever do enough? If we look out 20 years, 50 years, 100 years from now, and where the population most likely will be until it corrects at some point, but can we ever do enough to keep ahead of this?
Panelists?
You want to take that one? I have my thoughts, but
I don't know. I mean, it's an enormous challenge at both the macro level across all the dimensions of environmental resources and the depletion that we're dealing with, and in the narrow that we've been discussing with fisheries. So it's a matter of innovating as much as we can to address the issue at hand, and potentially creating scalable ways to deal with those knotty problems, but also recognizing the population is enormous, and you see that the population growth is enormous, and you see that being very different across different parts of the world, where in many parts of the developing world, as you know, it's tapering off, and in many parts of the developing world, it's growing in significant ways that are going to put added pressure on environmental degradation and everything else. So it's a conundrum. It doesn't in any way stand against or opposed to the kind of innovation we're talking about. That's part of the answer, but it may not be enough.
Well said, and to that I'll add that, you know, it's challenging because there's also, you have to look at it through different cultural lenses. You have the same conversation here, and probably if I were to say a show of hands, who thinks population growth should be curbed, a lot of hands will go up. You ask that same question in another continent, in a very different cultural setting, and you have the opposite reaction. So first of all, there's the cultural perspective that I think we have to be mindful of in order to address this. But the other is that still in many parts of the world that David was alluding to, part of the social safety net is to have children, right? So if we're able to increase the productivity of natural assets on where many of these poor people rely, whether it's the forest or the fisheries or productive landscapes, there's actually less of a, if you can call it I don't want to call it but an incentive to ensure that your social safety net is no longer rely on having a lot of children. And I was just trying to remember, because I was this amazing panel on projects that are being undertaken in Lake Victoria. And I'm not going to get it exactly right, but they've seen these amazing linkages between fisheries management and the appetite of these communities to actually go for family planning. Because one, as the productivity goes up, then the women can spend more time processing the fish and adding value to the fish. And the men who were initially not so supportive of family planning are now seeing it as a bonus, because they are looking to have smaller families where they can actually grow the business with more participation of the whole family, including the women in the family. So that's a small cultural revolution. It's a huge behavioral revolution. And we have to start looking also at that kind of entry points and what are the drivers. But I agree with you. Population growth is one of the big challenges, together with climate change, you know, these big conundrums that we're going to have to tackle and to work around.